Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. So today we got the full 3.16 Atlas passive trees, all 5 of them. That is the 4 new regions, the condensed regions, and also the Uncharted Realms. The first thing that needs to be said before we can go through any of these Atlas passives in any detail is that the changes that have been made to the Atlas are going to make choices harder. You only have 10 points to spend, but there are more good choices in each region. And that's going to mean that each of these regions, you're going to have to leave some previously good options unselected. The other thing is that each of your passive points is going to matter on a larger percentage of your maps. In the 3.15 Atlas, assuming you just ran assorted maps, like you weren't focusing on one specific region, you would find that approximately 12.5% of your time was spent in each region. And so that meant that, for instance, if you picked a node like Seance, which is in Hayward Hamlet, that would apply to 12.5% of your maps. It's now going to apply to 25% of your maps. And so that means that the individual points are going to matter more and they're going to be competing with a few better options. So now that we've talked about opportunity cost changes, let's talk about the actual nodes themselves. I'm not really necessarily going to compare them to what they were in 3.15 because that doesn't really matter very much. What matters is whether they're good or not now. So firstly, in Hayward Hamlet, we have the section that is dedicated to Jun missions and the Betrayal system. Test of Loyalty, Intelligence Gathering, and Bribery. Test of Loyalty is outstanding. Intelligence Gathering and Bribery are a bit weaker, but what's worth noting here is that the small nodes are actually quite good here. And I would suggest if you want to dedicate 4 passive points to Betrayal, that you take Test of Loyalty plus the small nodes over this small node here and this small node here. That will give you a 9% chance when you complete a map in this region in Hayward Hamlet to get an extra Jun mission. And because 25% of your maps will be in Hayward Hamlet, that's actually quite a lot. On the right-hand side, we have the Metamorph section. The Metamorph section is probably about as good as it was in the Lex Athene region in 3.15, which was okay. The thing is that it's competing with better things now, so I'm going to suggest that most players just entirely skip the Metamorph section of the tree. I don't think it's good enough to consider using, given what you're going to have to give up to take it now. Next up, you have the Ritual section, Sacred Lands and Paid in Blood. This is really, really strong, as Ritual is just an inherently strong mechanic. However, Ritual also has a couple of things that are changing this league for the worse. It is no longer on the Zana map device, and as a result, it is going to be a lot harder to focus heavily on Ritual. If you do focus heavily on Ritual, there are still ways to do it, but you're going to find yourself requiring things like rare sextant rolls in order to really, really dedicate yourself to Ritual. This is going to have a big impact on the Trade League economy for high item level bases of Ritual items. So things like item level 85 plus Blizzard Crowns are going to be much, much, much rarer than they've been in the past, and as a result, much, much, much more expensive. Now, maybe that will encourage you to go and focus on farming these things. Additionally, Ritual Vessels are going to be pretty scarce in this league as well. We might see a return to a 3.14 style economy where Ritual Vessels are selling for a third of an Exalt on their own. And that will be something that will then, of course, incentivize a few more people to spec into Ritual. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Seance is inherently a good node, but may not be good enough anymore. Take this if you're not sure what you're doing, if you're not sure what you want to do. It's a pretty good way to spend 2 points. And I would suggest that if you have 8 points you want to spend into things that you are dead set on doing, then maybe you can't really go wrong with putting 2 more points into Seance. One thing, though, that does need to be said about Seance is that don't ever pick this in hardcore. Next up, we have the Essences Wing. The Essences Wing is really good. It's still at full power, which I think a number of people were expecting this might have gotten nerfed. It's a very good choice, and I would default to taking this reasonably early in your progression through Hayward Hamlet's Atlas setup. Consider respeccing, though, later out of the Essence nodes into Harvest if you want to specialize further in crafting, because the longer that the league goes on, and this applies both to Trade League and to solo self-found players, the more specific the essence demand becomes. Early in a league, almost any deafening essence can be put to good use. Later in a league, you kind of only want 1 or 2 of them, and actually once you've got a collection of essences built up, Harvest becomes a good source of the couple of essences you do care about, because there is a craft to change an entire stack of essences from one type. So for instance, if you were to use deafening essences of loathing as an input into that harvest craft, you would have a chance of getting back deafening essences of spite. And because only a few of the different essences are sought after, this can actually end up making harvest as good a source of essences as the essence nodes once you're well established in a league, once you've got a decent cluster of essences. Harvest, most powerful crafts in the game come from harvest, as I think everyone knows. That's still the case, and there will be demand for this all league. In solo self-found, you should probably pick up these harvest options once you've got a few exalted orbs and you've unlocked better mods. At that point, you'll be able to start doing a lot of crazy crafts with the harvest nodes, and Hayward Hamlet will help you do that. Valdo's Rest is the next region of the Atlas. So the Blightwing of this is solid, especially if you want to acquire Blight-ravaged maps. This is the best source of blighted maps in the game, and immune response is critical if you are playing a blight-oriented strategy. You don't want to necessarily take immune response on day one, but it will speed up your completion of blights tremendously, and as a result will lead to you getting a lot more blighted maps a lot quicker. So that's a good choice in Valdo's Rest, without being so good that you feel you might need to take it. The Delve Wing is very specialized. Don't take this unless you are absolutely razor focused on Delve, and that's going to be your primary orientation for the whole league, is just going to be Delve. If you have a character that is capable of killing all the Crystal King at quite deep depths, and you have a lot of experience with that fight, then you can certainly make a lot of currency by optimizing for Delve and having this set up, like having the entirety of these nodes set up, and then just focusing on doing as little mapping as possible. When you do map, you do it in Valdo's Rest, and you just get your yourself out and you get out. Next up, you have the Strongbox section, which is amazing at league start and remains okay later. What is good here is actually the tamper-proof node. The fact that strongboxes in areas are corrupted is really significant. It causes these strongboxes to have a modest chance of dropping 6 linked items. These 6 linked items will be corrupt and not able to be modified further, but they will still be strong. Additionally, some of the 6 socket 5 link items that drop from this might end up being pretty good in the Scourge League as well. That's because Scourge is providing a couple of ways for the scourging system to potentially modify the links on an item. And I believe that one of the things that they're doing is having it set up so that one of the things that can happen when you scourge an item is replacing one broken link on an item with an actual complete link. And so that would mean that items that are 6 socket 5 link, if I am understanding the Scourge details correctly, and I could be wrong on this, if I'm understanding that correctly, then this would upgrade them to 6 links. Got to check that though. If that is the case, then tamper-proof becomes better as a result of it. Next up, you have the section related to Harbingers. Harbingers are still good, but they're not so good that not taking them is always a mistake. So I think that Valdo's Rest Harbingers will continue to be a solid choice that a lot of people will play around with. Delirium is interesting. The small nodes are extremely good. 3% chance to get a Delirium mirror. These, however, the large nodes are most of the weaker nodes that existed on the passive tree before for the Delirium encounters. I think that they're still strong. I think that the whole Delirium package is still pretty strong. And I do think that Delirium Sextants will be very precious this league. So when I say a Delirium Sextant, what I mean is a tradable Watchstone that has had either an Awakened Sextant or a Elevated Sextant roll onto it with area contains a Mirror of Delirium. These will be really strong this league, I believe. Okay, so the next region is Glenach Cairns. Firstly, we're starting from the north and working clockwise again, we have the Legion section, and the Legion section of the passive tree looks pretty good. It is the case that one of the good nodes that used to exist was 10% chance for a Legion to spawn. This has been split up and sort of been splintered and put into the small nodes. So the small nodes are good. The overall package is good for 4 or for 6 points, and I think it's something that a lot of players will use, especially given that Uber Timeless Emblems have been added, and that may be something that a lot of players want to try to get their teeth into. Incursion is as good as it was in 3.15, which means that it is an absolute must. to take all 4 of these points if you want to make Elva temples. So if you're wanting to try and make things like corruption chambers, then you need to do this section. That's basically it. Time dilation is something that's pretty good early. You probably want to respec out of it late though. Again, only of use if you're really doing a lot of incursion-oriented strategies. Next up, we have the section that is dedicated to rogue exiles. I kind of think this one's a bit silly. I've never seen anyone report it as being particularly great. Next, we have the Abyss section, and they've done some really annoying things here. I'm not a big fan of the changes to Abysses. Abyss stacking is still possible, but these changes are going to make it clunkier. So, firstly, we have Underground Kingdom as a prerequisite now for Abyssal Army. Abyssal Army is still as good as it always was, and that's actually one of the key things that makes the Abyss stacking strategies that I was talking about a lot last league work. Underground Kingdom, however, makes Abyssal Army worse, and that's because the Abyss monsters in areas grant 50% increased experience, and you get 100% increased monsters from Abyssal Army. This is weaker when you get an Underground Depths, when you get an Abyssal Depths. That's because if you're going to get an Abyssal Depths from an Abyss, it's only going to move once. So the Abyss will move once and then it will seal up. You'll only get one lot of monsters that are disgorged from the Abyss. That's annoying because when you've got Abyssal Army, you don't want these Abyssal Depths. You want them to be the standard troves so that they will be chasing you, or you'll be chasing them around the map 3, 4, or 5 times. So don't like the dyssynergy between these two. Additionally, the chance to spawn Abysses is gone from the small nodes as well. That was something that instead buffs the Underground Depths. That said, Lightless Legion is still really good early. If you're going to get to day 1 or day 2 tier 16s, a Lightless Legion will get you so many amazing crafting bases because every single monster in a tier 16 map associated Abyssal Depths is going to be monster level 86. I think it's actually 87. And so that means they're going to drop the top tier crafting bases in the game. They won't be dropping influenced items, but there's plenty of demand for item level 86 plus uninfluenced items early on. And so this will be something that is a really good choice if you're someone that can get to endgame ahead of the curve. Overall, I think that Abyss Scarabs are now more important for any strategy that revolves around Abysses, and that whilst this section of the tree is worse than it was in 3.15, it's still going, worse than the Abyss options were in 3.15, it's still going to be pretty solid overall. Now we get to the thing, though, that actually can fix some of the problems with Abyss, and that is Beyond. So Beyond is basically looking really good here, and it has very strong synergies with whichever you prefer, Legion or Abyss. So you got access to 3% chance for monsters to drop a Beyond portal. This Ascent of Blood node is not good on its own. Where it becomes good is in conjunction with more sources of the same stat. You can get 13% rolled onto a map, and you can get 13% by spending 5 chaos on the Zana Beyond map device option. Once you've got 13 or 26% from other sources, adding 3% more really matters. Then you've got Torn Veil, which is just an incredible node, and you've also got Per Demon, which is perfectly fine as well. So the entire Beyond package is really good. The Beyond package just makes any of the mechanics that concentrate monsters into one place better. This is Legion, this is Incursion, and this is Abyss. Any of these can be enhanced by the Beyond section. So what I suggest you do in Glenach Cairns is you probably want to invest 6 points in Beyond, and then 4 points in whichever of these 3 choices you think is better for your playstyle. Alternately, though, you might drop out of Per Demon and then take 6 points in Legion, or 6 points in Abyss, or all 6 points in Incursion, and that's also a perfectly good choice as well. Lots of interesting options there, but they do all revolve around Beyond. One thing needs to be said, Beyond requires a powerful character to take it on, and so if you don't yet have a powerful character, then you probably just want to hold off on these points and take whatever else you are going to get first, then pick these up as your character gets stronger. Next, we're going to move to Lex Athene over in the southeast. At least I think it's still in the southeast. It's always been in the outer southeast on the passive tree so far. This region is super strong, and that means that there is a huge opportunity cost for every choice you make in this region. So we have firstly the invasion line. So this is trespassers, areas contain additional invasion bosses, and exotic goods, areas invasion bosses in areas drop one additional valuable item. And this is super good early in the league. However, it does tend to drop off. A lot of these valuable items are things like large stacks of silver coins, 5 links, 6 links, low-end scarabs. Sometimes you get a medium-end scarab from it, and sometimes small clusters of currency. This is a pretty good choice, but it's something that you might find you're going to take early, then respec out of as you start getting Orbs of Unmaking, and then you'll spec into something that you can scale up a little bit more later on. Breach is next. Breach is weaker in some ways than some of the options that existed in 3.15 and stronger in others, but it doesn't need to really compete with 3.15 Breach. It needs to compete with other options in 3.16. And I think Breach is looking pretty good. Flash Breach is it's changing a little bit. It's losing its 10 additional rares and it's gaining 30% density. And it's now with other OK nodes as well. I think as an overall package, the Breach nodes are pretty good. They're far from a must-take, but if you like Breach, you should definitely feel confident that you can spec into these and that they will be good. There will be a lot of power in Flash Breach as a node. Next is the Einhar Wing. I'm going to suggest that with the Einhar Wing that you don't spec into it by default. Spec into it when you've got 50 Einhar missions saved up. That can include Bestiary Scarabs, maybe including Bestiary Scarabs you trade for. Then spec out of them again when they're all used. This is just really not for general mapping. It's not going to improve much unless you are actively spending Einhar missions. And so this is basically what Orbs of Unmaking are for. You could also say the same thing for the incursion nodes in the last region in Glenach Cairns, but they at least don't feel quite as bad to have up all the time. Heist is next. Heist is still really good on the passive tree. It's free currency if you don't run Heist, and it's when you do a bit of trading with it, and it's much better if you do. It'll add considerable currency to all your maps. Just picking up all of the extra smugglers caches that you get will give you a fair number of blueprints to sell and a very large number actually of contracts to sell. So if you are in Trade League, the Forbidden Trove Discord is your friend for selling contracts in bulk. You will be able to sell them in bulk and you will get a lot of currency for them in bulk. Just always pick them up. Just forget about them until you've got a couple of dozen of them saved up, maybe a few dozen, and then at that point, sell them in bulk. Next, we've got the sections that are set up for Expedition, and these are really strong nodes. Really strong choices here. So we have the new Distinguished Demolitionist, which grants increased explosive radius, which is huge, and gives you an extra explosive in areas. This is just fantastic. This is like one of those massive nodes that's going to make every single expedition you do feel a lot better. Then we have a 50% increased quantity of logbooks dropped by runic monsters in areas. This was one of the most powerful. This was the second best remnant mod, I think, and it's just basically going to be default. You're going to have that remnant mod all the time without a drawback to it. Additionally, you'll have increased runic monster markers. Buried Knowledge, really strong. And then last, we've got Ancient Writings, which is a bit weaker, but still pretty meaningful and is going to add up to extra remnants in the area. I think in terms of options in Lyra Arthane, the first option that I would suggest is what I would term a low investment / move speed oriented strategy. So this is where you are going to be focused on looking for high value events in maps. You'll still be killing monsters on your way there, but you're not going to be as focused with absolutely maximizing the number of monsters on each map. This would be a strategy to use alongside few or no scarabs to make a bunch of currency early in the league. This would be to spec into Inside Job and all of the expedition section. Where you get an expedition, run it, and where you get a smuggler's cache, loot it. Otherwise, you're not that fussed about the other stuff on the map. You're not spending a lot of currency on each map. You're just going to basically run them, get in, get out, and go on to the next map. This is a strategy that I think will be pretty solid for stockpiling a bunch of expedition logbooks and heist blueprints. So that's the lower investment strategy. The higher investment strategy is going to revolve around fully going into Breach, speccing everything for Breach, then taking whatever other 4 nodes you want. Possibly that could be taking 4 points in the Expedition tree, possibly that'll be taking the whole Heist tree, possibly it'll just be going with the Invasion Bosses one to minimize the time that you spend in each map. And then you're going to want to run Breach Scarabs on maps and focus on getting those breach monsters killed, looting all of the loot from breaches, and you'll be fine. Lastly, there's the Einhar section. Last, we got the Uncharted Realms. Uncharted Realms is broadly speaking the same as it used to be. There are some minor changes, mostly associated with the favor system being changed. And whilst a lot of people have called out that it looks like there's been a nerf to Close Allies, Close Allies is still fine because the small node has picked up the difference. So it used to be that the small node was something related to favor, and then this gave 10% Atlas completion. Now this gives 7%, but the small node gives 3%, so it's essentially the same as it used to be. Uncharted basically is unchanged, so as always, you must take Remnants of the Past first and Neural Pathways second in order to use those nodes to then acquire more of the points that are available in this region. Once you've got that started, then at that point you'll be able to get more access to the other encounters within the Uncharted Realms. And once you've got those encounters done, then at that point you will have a lot of flexibility as to where you go. I've never really liked the +1 awakening level side of the tree that much. Some people swear by it. I'm more inclined to swear at it. I don't think this is particularly strong, but if you like it, go ahead with it. I also don't think much of the Zana mission section, but the Zana mission section does have a single really good use, and that is when you want to complete your Atlas and complete a bunch of those unique maps that are on the Atlas that are a bit rarer. So maybe you'll find that that's useful early on for that purpose with a view to respecking out of it. The synthesis section is a huge investment, but one that does pay dividends in Trade League. Don't really recommend this in, beyond taking neural pathways so that you can get yourself a Maven's Invitation, the Forgotten unlocked. Beyond that, I don't recommend it in solo self-found, but in Trade League, if you're willing to trade for extra rewritten distant memories and similar maps, there's a couple of really good strategies that involve running those maps with all of the passive points allocated. But otherwise, I think that the best section of this Uncharted Realms is generally the Shaper and Elder section. Guardian's Aid makes maps a lot harder, so you can certainly hold off on taking that until your character's really strong. But once you get there, it's amazing. And you've also got the Sextant and Watchstone mods, which are really good. Secret of the Stones is absolutely required for a number of Atlas strategies. It's really, really good. Anyways, that's my first thoughts on the Atlas. So overall, in Hayward Hamlet, I think that there's a lot of different options. If you're wanting to go with a crafting focus, you probably want to start with the essences, later unspec them and spec into Harvest. You can probably go with whatever else in the other spots. Don't really bother with the Metamorph. I think it's underwhelming. Potentially, you want to go with Paid in Blood, as that will provide you a lot of options there. If you're someone that likes the Betrayal system, then take at least 4 points in Betrayal, so that is Test of Loyalty plus the 2 small nodes. And then there's a few other things you can do if you want to really specialize in Ritual. You can then seek out Cyrus exclusive Watchstones that grant +1 to tiers of maps, and use those and try and farm monster level 85 zones in order to get those ridiculously powerful helmets that you can get. Valdo's Rest, you can specialize heavily in Blight if you want. That will pay dividends when it comes to getting the blighted maps. That will be where Blight Ravage maps will drop. The old favourites of the Harbingers and Tamper-Proof are still pretty solid choices. And then if you're someone that's obsessed with Delve, then you've got an option to spec into there. The Delirium section is something you'll probably want to pick up later in the league, but I'm just not as impressed with it as you would generally expect, for the fact that it is Delirium. You know, Delirium is one of the more lucrative parts of the game, but the nodes just aren't all that good. You'll probably take them anyway. Glenach Cairns, the main strategy I would say here is just to take all of those Beyond nodes and then pick one of Abyss or Legion or Incursion and specialize there. Alternately, when you're wanting to use a bunch of Elva missions, then unspec some points, probably probably from Legion or Abyss, and then go into the incursion section. Anyways, that's all I got on that. If you've got comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, may your Valobs have interesting results.